Commander Vextrifal stared at the holographic display with the expression of someone who had just discovered their perfectly organized sock drawer had been invaded by chaos gremlins. The massive war computer, which the Netherian Empire had pompously named Strategicus Maximus, was displaying something that should have been impossible. "What do you mean the target planet is flagged?" Vextrifal's three eye stalks twitched in unison, a sure sign of impending nervous breakdown. Sub-Commander Klaxoth, who had the unfortunate job of being the bearer of bad news, cleared his throat with a sound like a deflating balloon. "Sir, the planet designation reads Earth, and, it's highlighted in what can only be described as panic red. The Netherian invasion protocol was supposedly flawless. For 743 years, they had conquered exactly 1,097 planets using the same methodical approach. Step 1, identify target. Step 2, analyze defenses. Step 3, overwhelm with superior technology. Step 4, collect resources and move on. Simple, efficient, foolproof. But Earth was making their supercomputer have what could only be described as a digital anxiety attack. "Perhaps," Klaxoth suggested hopefully, "it's a glitch." Strategicus Maximus immediately responded with a sound that was definitely not programmed into its usual repertoire, something between a whimper and the noise a refrigerator makes when it's about to die. The display flickered, showing a stream of data that made absolutely no sense. Warning: species classification impossible. Threat level undefined. Recommended action: consider retirement. Vextrifal's central eye stalk focused on the screen with laser intensity. "Did our military supercomputer just suggest we get a hobby instead of conquering this planet?" "It appears so, sir. Also, it's been playing what sounds like funeral music for the past 3 minutes. The truth was, Strategicus Maximus had encountered something that violated every known law of military logic. The computer had cross-referenced Earth against the galactic database of conquered worlds, the universal registry of extinct species, and even the comprehensive guide to things that go boom when you shoot them. The results were disturbing. According to the files, humans had somehow managed to be simultaneously the most peaceful and most violent species in the galaxy. They created beautiful art and then used it to insult each other. They invented medicine to save lives, and then immediately used the same knowledge to create weapons. They had split atoms for energy and then wondered if they could use that for fireworks. "Sir," Klaxoth said, his voice getting progressively squeakier, "I've been reading the behavioral analysis reports, and humans appear to do things just to see what happens. That's impossible. No intelligent species would experiment without proper safety protocols. They invented something called extreme sports, sir. Apparently they throw themselves off cliffs for fun." Vextrifal's eye stalks crossed. "They throw themselves off cliffs for recreational purposes?" "Yes, sir. And they've also been observed putting chemicals in their food that cause pain, then calling it spicy and eating more of it." The war room fell silent, except for the continued funeral dirge emanating from Strategicus Maximus. Finally, Vice Admiral Quarthak, who had been quietly reviewing invasion protocols, spoke up. "There's another problem, sir. According to the Deep Space Reconnaissance files, humans have been observed by 17 different civilizations." "Observed how?" "Well, sir, the Flixarian Empire tried to study them in 2847 and ended up in therapy for 3 centuries. The Zoltharian Collective attempted a cultural exchange program and immediately requested a memory wipe. And the Quentari, well, the Quentari don't talk about it anymore." Vextrifal stood up, his 6 arms gesticulating wildly. "Are you telling me that 17 advanced civilizations have encountered these humans and not a single one has managed to conquer them?" "Actually, sir, it's worse than that. They didn't even try to conquer them. The reports all say the same thing. Humans are complicated. De Strategicus Maximus chose that moment to project a holographic summary of human behavior that looked like it had been written by someone having a mental breakdown. Humans. They will befriend deadly predators and keep them as pets. They will argue about anything. They will turn survival into games. They will make food so spicy it requires medical attention. They will compete to see who can carry the most grocery bags in one trip. They will... Error, logic circuits overloading. "It's having another episode," Claxorth observed helpfully. The truth was getting stranger by the minute. The more the Netherian command reviewed the files, the more they realized that humans didn't just break the rules of warfare. They seemed to be completely unaware that rules existed in the first place. "Look at this," Quarthik said, pulling up a report from a Vorthakian scout ship. They observed a group of humans who deliberately made their shelter building into a competitive sport. They called it construction, and they actually enjoyed the process. That's actually quite logical," Vextrafal said, relief evident in his voice. "Sir, they were building houses shaped like giant shoes." "What?" "And some of them were upside down." The war room erupted in confused chatter. "How do you invade a species that treats logic like a suggestion? How do you conquer people who seem to find entertainment in the most mundane activities?" "There's more, sir," Claxorth said, looking increasingly pale. "They've been observed participating in something called karaoke, where they deliberately sing badly and somehow enjoy it more when they're terrible at it. They celebrate incompetence." "It gets worse. They have events where they intentionally consume ethanol until their coordination fails. Then they call it fun and do it again the next week." Vextrafal sat down heavily. "Are we sure they're intelligent?" "That's the problem, sir. All evidence suggests they're extremely intelligent. They've mastered space travel, quantum physics, and genetic engineering. They've also figured out how to make food that tastes like other food, but isn't actually that food. Why would they want food that tastes like other food? The reports don't explain that part, sir, but they seem very proud of it." At this point, Strategicus Maximus decided to offer its own analysis. Conclusion: humans operate on a logic system that appears to be based on chaos theory, random variables, and what they call because why not. Recommended strategy: surrender immediately. "Our war computer wants to surrender," Vextrafal stated flatly, "to a species we haven't even met yet." Technically, sir, it's suggesting we skip the meeting entirely." The situation was becoming increasingly absurd. The Netherian Empire, which had conquered nearly 1,100 worlds with ruthless efficiency, was being stumped by a species that apparently thought difficulty was a feature, not a bug. "What about their military capabilities?" Vextrafal asked desperately. Claxorth consulted his datapad. "Well, sir, they've been observed turning their conflicts into learning experiences. They study their own wars and then make entertainment about them. They make entertainment about warfare." "Yes, sir, and apparently they critique the accuracy of their own entertainment while simultaneously enjoying the inaccuracies." "That makes no sense whatsoever." "According to the psychological profiles, sir, that's exactly the point." Vice Admiral Quarthak had been quietly reviewing more files and suddenly looked up with genuine concern. "Commanders, I think we have a much bigger problem. Bigger than a species that defies logic. The files indicate that humans have been in contact with the Galactic Council for over 50 years. "What? Why weren't we informed?" "Because, sir, the Galactic Council has classified all human-related information as need to know, and apparently nobody needs to know." What does that mean?" "It means, sir, that the Council has been deliberately keeping humanity a secret from the rest of the galaxy. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The Galactic Council, that august body of advanced civilizations that governed interstellar relations, had been hiding an entire species from the galaxy at large. "Why would they do that?" Vextrafal asked, though part of him was beginning to suspect the answer. The classification notes suggest that humans have a tendency to complicate things. Complicate how? Well, sir, apparently they asked the council why they didn't have democratic elections. Democracy? In the Galactic Council? Yes, sir. And when the council explained that they were far too advanced for such primitive concepts, the humans asked if they could observe a few council sessions to understand the process better. That seems reasonable. It would be, sir, except that they started taking notes and asking questions. What kind of questions? Questions like, why do you assume your way is better? And have you considered that other species might have valuable perspectives? And what's your plan for quality control? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humans hadn't just challenged the Council's authority. They had questioned the fundamental assumptions upon which galactic civilization was built. Sir, Klaxorth said quietly, there's something else. The humans apparently suggested that the Council might benefit from what they called fresh perspectives and accountability measures. They wanted to reform the Galactic Council? Worse, sir, they wanted to help. Strategicus Maximus, which had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly displayed a new message. Urgent update. Galactic Council records indicate that humans have been designated as Pandora's species. Approach with extreme caution, or preferably not at all. Pandora's species. According to the mythology files, sir, Pandora was a human concept about opening something that probably should have stayed closed. And they named an entire classification after it? Yes, sir. Apparently, the Council learned that humans have a tendency to ask questions that make other species reconsider their entire worldview. The truth was beginning to emerge, and it was far more disturbing than anyone had imagined. The Galactic Council hadn't been protecting the galaxy from humanity. They had been protecting humanity from the galaxy. Because once other species encountered humans, they started asking uncomfortable questions about their own societies. The Flixarian Empire, Korthik read from his files, apparently dissolved their monarchy after 3 months of human contact and established something called a constitutional democracy, with term limits and transparency requirements. They voluntarily gave up absolute power. Yes, sir, and they reported being surprisingly satisfied with the results. What about the Zoltharian Collective? They restructured their entire economic system after humans introduced them to concepts like work-life balance and employee satisfaction surveys. Is that why they requested memory wipes? No, sir. They requested memory wipes because they realized they had been happy with their previous system only because they had never considered alternatives. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Humans weren't just another species to conquer. They were a galactic-level disruption to the established order. They had a disturbing tendency to look at perfectly functional systems and ask, but could this be better? Sir, Klaxorth said, his voice barely above a whisper, I think I understand why Earth was flagged in our system. Explain. The invasion protocols are designed to identify and conquer species that operate according to standard galactic norms. But humans don't operate according to any norms. They've been classified as a catalyst species. What does that mean? It means, sir, that they don't just change themselves, they change everything around them. Not through conquest or force, but by asking questions that make other species realize they have choices. Strategicus Maximus began displaying what could only be described as a nervous breakdown in digital form. Alert. Catalyst species detected. Invasion protocols ineffective. Recommend immediate strategic withdrawal to safe distance of approximately 17 galaxies. 17 galaxies? Sir, I don't think distance is the issue. I think the issue is that once you've encountered humans, you start thinking like them. What do you mean? Well, sir, I've been reading these reports for the past hour, and I'm starting to wonder why we invade planets in the first place. The war room fell dead silent. Vice Admiral Korthak slowly turned to stare at Klaxorth, who was looking genuinely confused. I mean, Klaxorth continued, apparently oblivious to the horror he was causing, what if we just asked them if they wanted to trade instead? Klaxorth! Vextrafol shouted, his 3 eye stalks snapping to attention. You are exhibiting signs of human influence. Report to decontamination immediately. But, sir, it's a legitimate question. What if conquest isn't the most efficient method of resource acquisition? Security! We have a code human in the war room. As security officers rushed in to escort the contaminated Klaxorth away, Vextrafol realized that the situation was far worse than anyone had imagined. Humans weren't just dangerous because they were unpredictable. They were dangerous because they were contagious. Quarthak, he said carefully, are you experiencing any urges to question our fundamental military doctrine? Well, sir, now that you mention it, I have been wondering why we need to conquer exactly 1,097 planets. Why not 1,096 or 1,098? Security, 2 code humans. But as the security officers arrived, one of them, a usually reliable sergeant named Blorthak, raised his hand tentatively. Sir, I don't mean to interrupt, but I've been listening to the briefing and I'm curious about something. What is it, Sergeant? Well, sir, if humans are so dangerous, why hasn't anyone just asked them what they want? The silence that followed was the kind of silence that occurs when an entire worldview collapses. It was the silence of a perfectly organized military machine grinding to a halt because someone had asked a question that should have been obvious, but somehow wasn't. You want to ask them what they want, Vextrafol repeated slowly. Yes, sir. I mean, if they're as unpredictable as the reports suggest, maybe the predictable approach isn't going to work anyway. Strategicus Maximus, which had been cycling through various error messages, suddenly displayed something new. Innovative solution detected. Analyzing. Solution appears to be sensible. Error. Sensible solutions not found in military protocol database. Our war computer thinks talking to them is a good idea, Vextrafol observed weakly. Sir, Sergeant Blorthak said, what if we sent a small diplomatic mission instead of an invasion fleet? Diplomatic mission? We don't do diplomatic missions. We do invasions. But, sir, why? And there it was, the question that had been lurking beneath the surface of every military briefing for 743 years. Why did they do invasions? Because it was efficient, because it was traditional, because no one had ever asked why. Because, Vextrafol said, his voice lacking its usual conviction, that's how things are done. But, sir, what if things could be done differently? The war room was now experiencing what could only be described as a collective existential crisis. Strategicus Maximus was displaying a continuous stream of questions. Why conquer? Why not cooperate? Why assume conflict? Why not communicate? The computer is asking philosophical questions, Quarthak observed with detached fascination. And they're good questions, Blorthak added helpfully. Enough! Vextrafol shouted, though his protest sounded more desperate than commanding. We are the Netherian Empire. We conquer worlds. We do not ask them politely if they would like to be conquered. But, sir, Blorthak said reasonably, maybe that's exactly what makes us different from humans. What do you mean? Well, sir, according to the reports, humans try things that don't make sense to see if they might work anyway. Maybe we should try something that doesn't make sense to us. The logic was both perfectly sound and completely insane. Try something that doesn't make sense to see if it might work. That was exactly the kind of thinking that had gotten 17 civilizations into therapeutic intervention. Sir, Quarthak said slowly, I'm beginning to understand something about the classification system. What? I don't think humans are classified as dangerous because they're aggressive. I think they're classified as dangerous because they're optimistic. Optimistic? Yes, sir. They seem to believe that things can be better than they are, and apparently that belief is contagious. Strategicus Maximus suddenly displayed a new message. Analysis complete. Human influence detected in current discussion. Recommended action: embrace change or maintain status quo. Decision parameters: unknown. Unknown decision parameters? Sir, I think the computer is asking us to choose for ourselves instead of following pre-programmed protocols. The room fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of genuine consideration rather than shocked horror. For the first time in 743 years, the Netherian Empire was facing a decision that wasn't covered in their standard operating procedures. What do you think would happen, Vextrafol asked carefully, if we sent a diplomatic mission to Earth? Based on the reports, sir, one of three things. Either they would welcome us with confusing hospitality, ask us uncomfortable questions about our imperial structure, or invite us to participate in something they call cultural exchange. And the worst-case scenario? Sir, the worst-case scenario is that we might end up enjoying ourselves. That's the worst case? Well, sir, according to the psychological profiles, humans have a tendency to make other species realize they've been taking themselves too seriously. The implications were staggering. The Netherian Empire, which had spent nearly 8 centuries perfecting the art of military conquest, was being forced to confront the possibility that they had been approaching galactic relations in the most inefficient way possible. Sir, Sergeant Blorthak said, I've been thinking about the logistics. What logistics? Well, sir, maintaining an empire of over 1,000 worlds requires enormous resources. But what if some of those worlds actually wanted to be part of the empire? Wanted to be part of it? Yes, sir. What if we offered them something they actually needed instead of just taking what we wanted? Strategicus Maximus began displaying calculations at an incredible rate, analyzing resource allocation, comparing conquest costs to cooperation benefits. Results: cooperation models show 347% efficiency improvement. The computer thinks cooperation is more efficient than conquest, Vextrafol stated, his voice hollow with disbelief. Sir, that's not even the strangest part. The strangest part is that it took us this long to ask. And there it was, the fundamental question that had been hiding in plain sight for centuries. Why had no one ever asked whether their approach was the best one? Why had efficiency become equated with tradition? Why had no one ever wondered if there might be better ways to achieve their goals? We need to send a diplomatic mission to Earth, Vextrafol said finally. Sir, if humans are as dangerous as the reports suggest, then we need to understand that danger. And if they're as contagious as they appear to be, then we need to understand what we're catching before it spreads any further. And if it's already spread, sir? Vextrafol looked around the war room at his officers, who were all looking back at him with expressions of curiosity rather than military discipline. Strategicus Maximus was displaying what appeared to be a smiley face, which definitely wasn't in its original programming. Then we need to figure out what to do with an empire that's starting to ask questions. The diplomatic mission to Earth was prepared with the kind of nervous energy typically reserved for diffusing explosives. 3 ships, minimal weapons, maximum confusion. The crew was selected based on their ability to remain calm under pressure and their complete lack of exposure to human-related reports. Ambassador Nethricol, a career diplomat who had successfully negotiated peace treaties with 14 different species, was chosen to lead the mission. His first question upon reviewing the briefing materials was, why didn't anyone try talking to them sooner? Sir, his aide replied, that's exactly the kind of question we're hoping you won't ask. But it's a reasonable question. Yes, sir, that's the problem. The journey to Earth took 3 standard galactic weeks, during which the diplomatic team spent considerable time trying to understand what they were getting themselves into. The more they studied the available reports, the more they realized that human behavior seemed to follow patterns that were both completely logical and utterly unpredictable. They appear to value something called creativity above efficiency, Nethricol observed. Is that good or bad, sir? I have no idea. But according to the cultural analysis, they deliberately create problems for themselves and then solve them for entertainment. Entertainment? Yes, they call them puzzles and challenges, and they seem to enjoy the process more than the results. The diplomatic team was still trying to process this information when they arrived at the edge of the solar system. Almost immediately, they were contacted by what appeared to be a space station. Unknown vessels. This is Lunar Station. Please state your business and intentions. Nethricol took a deep breath. Lunar Station. This is Ambassador Nethricol of the Netherian Empire. We are here on a diplomatic mission to establish contact with Earth. There was a pause. Then, did you say diplomatic mission? Yes, that's correct. That's different. Most species usually try the whole surrender or die thing first. Are you sure you want to skip straight to talking? Nethricol looked at his communication officer, who shrugged. Yes, we would like to skip straight to talking. Cool. Stand by for escort, and welcome to the solar system. You're gonna love it here. We've got 3 planets with life, 2 with intelligent life, and 1 with really great coffee. They're welcoming us, Nethricol said wonderingly. Sir, they mentioned coffee. Should I add that to the threat assessment? I don't think coffee is a weapon, Lieutenant. Sir, with respect, we don't know what humans consider weapons. The escort ships that arrived were unlike anything in the Netherian fleet. They were sleek, efficient, and appeared to be decorated with what could only be described as artwork. One of them had a picture of a small, furry creature with enormous eyes painted on the hull. Lunar Station. What is the significance of the creature? On your escort vessel? Oh, that's Commander Peterson's ship. He's really into cats. Cats? Yeah, they're these small predators that humans keep as companions. Peterson has 7 of them. He keeps 7 predators as companions. Well, technically they're not very effective predators anymore. Mostly they just sleep and knock things off tables. Why would he want animals that knock things off tables? Because they're cute, and they make him happy. The diplomatic team exchanged glances. Humans kept inefficient predators as companions because they were aesthetically pleasing and emotionally satisfying. This was exactly the kind of behavior that had driven 17 civilizations to therapy. Lunar Station, we are ready to proceed to Earth. Awesome. Fair warning, though, you're arriving during what we call Tuesday, which means everyone's going to be either really excited to meet you or really confused about why you're here. Possibly both. Is Tuesday significant? Not really, but humans like to assign meaning to arbitrary time divisions. It helps with organization and gives people something to complain about. As they approached Earth, the diplomatic team got their first real look at human civilization. The planet was covered with lights, structures, and what appeared to be transportation networks of impossible complexity. But more importantly, it was covered with signs of activity that made no apparent sense. Sir, the sensor officer reported, I'm detecting large gatherings of humans who appear to be running in circles. Running in circles? Yes, sir, in groups. They seem to be enjoying it. They're exercising for recreation, Nethricol realized. They're making themselves tired on purpose. Sir, I'm also detecting groups of humans who appear to be hitting small balls with sticks and then chasing them. They're playing games. Sir, some of them are doing it in the rain. The true scope of human behavior was becoming clear. They didn't just do things for survival or efficiency. They did things because they found them interesting, enjoyable, or challenging. They had turned necessity into choice, and choice into entertainment. Lunar Station, we are ready to land. Great. We've prepared a landing area at the United Nations headquarters in New York. You'll be met by Secretary General Maria Santos and a full diplomatic team. Secretary General? Yeah, she's the elected representative of the United Nations, which is the global organization that handles international relations and first contact protocols. Elected representative? Yep. Every few years, the member nations vote on who gets to be in charge of global diplomacy. It's actually pretty cool. She used to be a teacher before she got into politics. A teacher? Yeah. She specialized in helping young humans learn about different cultures and perspectives. Turns out those skills transfer pretty well to galactic diplomacy. The landing at the United Nations was unlike anything in Netherian experience. Instead of military formations or defensive preparations, there were crowds of humans who appeared to be celebrating. They were holding signs with messages like, "Welcome to Earth," and "Finally someone who talks first." Secretary General Santos met them at the landing pad with a smile that was both warm and slightly amused. "Ambassador Nethricol, welcome to Earth. I have to say, you've caused quite a stir." "Her stir?" "Yes. Word got out that someone was coming to visit instead of conquer, and frankly, we're not sure how to handle it. Our first contact protocols are mostly designed around the assumption that visitors would be hostile, and we're not hostile. Well, you asked permission to land, and you said please. That's already more polite than most of our own species managers." As they walked toward the UN building, Nethricol couldn't help but notice that the humans around them seemed genuinely curious, rather than afraid. Children were pointing and asking questions. Adults were taking pictures and talking excitedly among themselves. "Secretary General Santos, aren't your people concerned about potential threats?" "Oh, absolutely. But they're also excited about the possibilities. Humans tend to be optimistic about new experiences, even when they probably shouldn't be. That seems inadvisable." "It probably is, but it's also how we've managed to survive and thrive, despite making questionable decisions on a regular basis." The diplomatic meetings that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of formal negotiations or territorial discussions, the humans started with what they called getting to know each other. They served food, shared stories, and asked questions that had nothing to do with military capabilities or resource allocation. "So," Secretary General Santos said, settling into her chair with a cup of the mysterious substance called coffee, "what brings you to our little corner of the galaxy?" "Well," Nethricol replied carefully, "we were exploring, and your planet was identified as being of interest." "Interest how?" "Your species has been observed by other civilizations, and the reports were unusual." "Unusual how?" "According to our files, every civilization that has encountered humans has experienced significant cultural changes." Santos laughed, and it was a sound that somehow managed to be both reassuring and slightly alarming. "Ah, I see. You've heard about our reputation." "You have a reputation?" "Oh, yes. We're known throughout the galaxy as the species that asks uncomfortable questions and suggests improvements that nobody asked for." "And you're proud of this?" "Proud might be too strong a word, but we're not ashamed of it either. We figure that if something can be improved, why not try to improve it? But what if the current system is functioning adequately? Well, adequate is fine, but why settle for adequate when you could have something better?" And there it was, the fundamental difference that had been driving galactic civilizations to distraction for decades. Humans didn't just accept good enough. They looked at functional systems and asked, "But what if we could make this great?" "Secretary General Santos, may I ask you a question?" "Of course. Why do you think other species find human behavior so disturbing?" Santos considered this while sipping her coffee. "I think it's because we represent change, and change is scary. Most civilizations seem to reach a point where they decide they've figured everything out, and they just want to maintain the status quo. And humans don't want to maintain the status quo. Oh, we're terrible at maintaining the status quo. We're constantly trying to improve things, fix problems, and make life better for everyone. It's kind of compulsive. But what if your improvements make things worse? Then we try to fix that too. It's not a perfect system, but it's definitely not boring." "Oh, The cultural exchange continued for several days, during which the Netherian diplomatic team experienced something that had never happened in 743 years of conquest. They started to enjoy themselves. The humans showed them art galleries where creativity was valued above utility. They took them to sporting events where competition was pursued for the joy of the challenge rather than the dominance of the victor. They introduced them to restaurants where food was prepared not just for nutrition, but for pleasure. "This is inefficient," Nethrikol observed, watching humans spend hours preparing and consuming a meal that could have been nutritionally optimized in minutes. "Extremely inefficient," Santos agreed cheerfully, "but it's also delicious, social, and fun. We could probably survive on nutrition pills, but why would we want to? Because it would be more efficient. But efficiency isn't the only value worth pursuing. What's the point of an efficient life if you don't enjoy living it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Netherian Empire had ever believed about civilization and progress. "Secretary General Santos," Nethrikol said carefully, "I think I understand why other species find you disturbing." "Oh, you make us question whether we've been doing things the right way. And that's disturbing?" "Extremely. It's much easier to assume you've figured everything out than to consider that you might be wrong. But what if you're not wrong? What if you're just incomplete?" "Incomplete, yes. What if your way of doing things is perfectly valid, but it's not the only way? What if there are other approaches that might work just as well, or better, or differently?" The implications were staggering. The Netherian Empire hadn't necessarily been wrong to pursue conquest, but they might have been incomplete in assuming it was the only viable approach to galactic expansion. "Secretary General Santos, I need to ask you something important." "Go ahead." "What would happen if the Netherian Empire decided to try something different?" "Different how?" "What if instead of conquering planets, we tried to cooperate with them?" Santos's face lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that had been making galactic civilizations nervous for decades. "Now that would be interesting. What kind of cooperation were you thinking about?" "I honestly don't know. We've never considered it before." Well, that's the beauty of trying something new. You get to figure it out as you go along." The return journey to Netherian space was filled with the kind of intense discussion that typically preceded major military campaigns, except that instead of planning attacks, they were planning something that had no precedent in their civilization's history: voluntary cooperation. "What if we offered to share our transportation technology in exchange for access to their educational systems?" one diplomat suggested. "What if we established cultural exchange programs instead of occupation protocols?" suggested another. "What if we asked planets what they needed instead of just taking what we wanted?" The suggestions came fast and furious, each one more radical than the last. Strategicus Maximus, monitoring the discussions, began displaying messages like "innovative thinking detected" and "creativity levels approaching optimal." When they arrived back at Netherian Command, Commander Vextrafol was waiting with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "Ambassador Nethrikol, what did you learn about the human threat?" "Sir, I learned that humans aren't actually a threat in the traditional sense." "What do you mean?" "They're not aggressive, they're not conquering other species, and they're not trying to dominate the galaxy." "Then why are they classified as so dangerous?" "Because, sir, they make you want to be better than you are." The statement hung in the air like a revelation. The Netherian Empire, which had spent centuries perfecting the art of conquest, was being offered the opportunity to perfect the art of cooperation instead. "Sir," Nethrikol continued, "I think we need to consider the possibility that there might be more efficient ways to achieve our goals." "More efficient than conquest?" "Yes, sir. What if we could achieve the same results? Resource access, territorial expansion, technological advancement through cooperation rather than domination?" "Strategicus, Maximus immediately began processing the implications. Analyzing cooperation models, resource efficiency projected at 89% improvement. Territorial expansion through voluntary association shows 156% growth potential. Conclusion: conquest is inefficient. Our war computer has declared conquest inefficient, Vextrifol said weakly. Sir, it gets better. The humans have invited us to participate in something called the Galactic Cooperation Initiative. What's that? It's a new organization they're proposing that would facilitate voluntary cooperation between species instead of the current system of conquest, subjugation, and therapy. They want to reform galactic civilization. Sir, they want to improve galactic civilization. There's a difference. The truth was that humans had been quietly working on this for decades, while the rest of the galaxy had been maintaining the status quo through a combination of tradition and mutual avoidance. Humans had been developing models for interspecies cooperation that actually worked. They've already gotten preliminary agreements from the Flixarian Democratic Republic, the Zoltharian Cooperative, and the reformed Quentari Federation, Nethricol explained. Reformed? Yes, sir. Apparently, once you start questioning whether your current system is optimal, it's difficult to stop. The implications were spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. The human approach wasn't just affecting individual species, it was creating a cascading effect throughout the galaxy as civilizations began to reconsider their fundamental assumptions about how societies should function. Sir, Klaxorth said, returning from his decontamination session, I've been thinking. Oh no. Sir, what if the humans are right? Right about what? What if we've been approaching this all wrong? What if conquest isn't the best way to build an empire? Klaxorth, you've been exposed to human thinking. Your judgment is compromised. But, sir, my judgment led me to question our methods, and questioning our methods led me to better solutions. Isn't that exactly the kind of improvement we should want? Strategicus Maximus, which had been listening to the conversation, displayed a new message. Observation. Lieutenant Klaxorth's logical processes have improved 34% since exposure to human concepts. Recommend similar exposure for all personnel. The computer wants everyone to be infected with human thinking, Vextrifol observed. Sir, maybe it's not an infection. Maybe it's an upgrade. The conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. The holographic image of Council Prime Nexilorth appeared, looking substantially more frazzled than usual. Commander Vextrifol, we understand you've made contact with the humans. Yes, Council Prime. We sent a diplomatic mission. A diplomatic mission, without authorization. Sir, our invasion protocols flagged Earth as requiring special handling. We interpreted that as a recommendation for diplomatic contact. Commander, the humans have been contained for 50 years for good reason. Contained? Yes, we've been keeping them isolated to prevent exactly what's happening now. And what exactly is happening now? Chaos, Commander. Complete chaos. Do you know what they've done? What have they done? They've convinced the Zoltharian Collective to implement something called worker satisfaction standards. The Flixarians have established transparency in government. The Quentari have started public consultation processes. It's madness. It sounds like improvement. It is improvement. That's the problem. Once you start improving things, where does it end? The truth was becoming clear. The Galactic Council hadn't been protecting the galaxy from humans. They had been protecting their own authority from human ideas about accountability, democracy, and continuous improvement. Council Prime, what exactly are you afraid of? We're afraid of change, Commander. We've had a stable galactic civilization for thousands of years. Why would we want to change that? Because stable doesn't necessarily mean optimal. Commander, you've been compromised. Sir, I've been educated. There's a difference. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Netherian command center in stunned silence. The Galactic Council, the august body that had governed interstellar relations for millennia, was opposed to improvement because improvement threatened their control. "Sir," Sergeant Blorthak said thoughtfully, "I think we have a choice to make." "What kind of choice?" "We can either continue following the Council's directives and maintain the status quo, or we can join the humans in trying to make things better. And if we choose improvement, then we become part of the solution instead of part of the problem." Strategicus Maximus displayed its analysis. Choice parameters: maintain current system with declining efficiency, or adopt improved system with exponential growth potential. Logical recommendation: embrace change. "The computer recommends embracing change," Vextrafol said. "Sir, the computer has been recommending change since we first encountered the human data. We just weren't listening." The realization hit like a revelation. Strategicus Maximus hadn't been malfunctioning when it encountered human information. It had been functioning perfectly. It had simply reached the logical conclusion that their current methods were suboptimal compared to available alternatives. "Nethricol," Vextrafol said finally, "send a message to Secretary General Santos." "What should I tell her, sir?" "Tell her the Netherian Empire would like to discuss joining the Galactic Cooperation Initiative." "Sir, the Council won't approve." "Then we'll have to decide whether we're working for the Council or working for the improvement of galactic civilization." The decision was made with surprising unanimity. The Netherian Empire, which had spent 743 years perfecting conquest, voted to try cooperation instead. It wasn't just a change in tactics. It was a fundamental shift in philosophy, from taking what they wanted to offering what others needed. The response from Earth was immediate and enthusiastic. Secretary General Santos personally transmitted a welcome message that somehow managed to be both professional and warm. "Welcome to the future, Netherian Empire. We think you're going to love what we're building together." The transformation that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The Netherian Empire didn't just join the Galactic Cooperation Initiative, they helped expand it. Their military expertise was redirected toward peacekeeping and disaster response. Their conquest technology was adapted for exploration and infrastructure development. Their territorial expansion became voluntary association. Within 6 months, the initiative had grown to include over 200 worlds. Within a year, it had become the largest interspecies organization in galactic history. And within 2 years, the old Galactic Council found itself in the peculiar position of being invited to join an organization that was everything they had tried to prevent. "They want us to join them," Council Prime Nexilorth sputtered during an emergency session. "Yes, Council Prime, they've sent a formal invitation." "On what grounds?" "They say that the Council's experience in galactic governance would be valuable in helping to structure the new cooperative framework." "They want our expertise?" "Yes, sir. They want to learn from our successes and improve on our mistakes." "Improve on our mistakes?" "Yes, sir. They've identified several areas where the Council's historical approach could be optimized." The invitation from the Galactic Cooperation Initiative was unlike anything the Council had ever received. Instead of demanding submission or offering ultimatums, it simply asked, "Would you like to help us make things better?" The simplicity of the question was terrifying. For thousands of years, the Council had operated on the assumption that their way was the best way. Now they were being asked to consider whether their way might simply be one way among many. "What do they mean by better?" Council Member Zorthik asked. "According to their proposal, they mean more efficient, more equitable, more responsive to the needs of member species, and more adaptable to changing circumstances." "But our current system works." "Yes, but their question is, could it work better?" The debate that followed was unprecedented in Council history. For the first time in millennia, they were discussing not whether to maintain their authority, but whether their authority was being used in the most effective way possible. The humans have introduced something called evidence-based governance, the Council's research division reported. They make decisions based on what actually works rather than what has traditionally been done. That sounds logical. It is logical, Council member. That's what makes it so disturbing. The ultimate decision came down to a simple choice: evolve or become irrelevant. The galaxy was changing around them, and they could either be part of that change or be left behind by it. Council Prime, the research director said, I believe we need to consider the possibility that the humans might actually be on to something. You think cooperation is better than control. I think results are better than assumptions, and the results from the cooperation initiative are impressive. The data was undeniable. Species that joined the initiative showed improvements in resource allocation, technological development, social satisfaction, and interspecies relations. They weren't just maintaining the status quo, they were actively making things better. Very well, Council Prime Nexilorth said finally. Send a response to the Galactic Cooperation Initiative. What should we tell them, Council Prime? Tell them the Galactic Council is interested in exploring how we might contribute to their efforts. Should I mention that we've been opposing them for the past 2 years? I think they already know that. But apparently, they're more interested in what we can do going forward than what we've done in the past. The integration of the Galactic Council into the Cooperation Initiative marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. It wasn't the triumphant conquest of one civilization over another. It was the voluntary evolution of galactic society from a system based on control to one based on cooperation. The transformation wasn't without challenges. Species that had spent millennia following orders had to learn how to make decisions collaboratively. Civilizations that had avoided contact had to figure out how to communicate effectively. Organizations that had maintained power through exclusivity had to adapt to transparency and accountability, but the results were undeniable. Resource conflicts decreased as voluntary sharing replaced territorial disputes. Technological advancement accelerated as knowledge sharing became standard practice. Social problems were addressed cooperatively rather than being left for individual species to handle alone. You know what the strangest part is? Secretary General Santos said during a celebration marking the 5th anniversary of the initiative. What's that? Ambassador Nethricol asked. None of this was actually the humans' idea. What do you mean? The cooperation, the improvement, the questioning of assumptions. These are just natural responses to problems. Every species in the galaxy was capable of this kind of thinking. We just happened to be the ones who weren't afraid to try it. So what made humans different? We weren't different. We just refused to accept that good enough was good enough. Commander Vextrifal, now Director of Interspecies Cooperation for the former Netherian Empire, listened to the conversation with the kind of amazement that comes from realizing how simple the solution had been all along. Strategicus Maximus, he said to the computer that had started it all. Do you have any analysis of how this situation developed? Analysis complete, the computer responded. Galactic civilization required a catalyst to question fundamental assumptions. Humans provided that catalyst not through superior technology or military force, but through persistent curiosity and refusal to accept suboptimal solutions. So the humans weren't special? Humans were ordinary. Their approach was extraordinary. What was extraordinary about it? They assumed that things could be improved, rather than assuming that things were already optimal. The revelation was both profound and absurdly simple. The galaxy hadn't needed a revolution. It had needed permission to evolve. And humans had provided that permission simply by asking, why not? Years later, when galactic historians tried to understand how a single species had transformed interstellar civilization, they consistently reached the same conclusion. Humans hadn't changed the galaxy through force or manipulation. They had changed it by demonstrating that change was possible. The old invasion fleets were now exploration fleets. The conquest protocols had become cooperation frameworks. The territorial disputes had evolved into resource-sharing agreements, and the species that had once feared each other now worked together to solve problems that no single civilization could handle alone. You know, Vextrifol mused during a routine cooperation planning session, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if we had actually tried to invade Earth. According to the psychological profiles, Claxorth replied, the humans probably would have invited us to dinner and asked if we needed anything. And then what? Then they would have explained why invasion was inefficient and suggested better alternatives. So we would have ended up in the same place? Yes, sir, but it would have taken longer and been much more embarrassing. Strategicus Maximus, now renamed Cooperaticus Maximus at the computer's own request, displayed its final analysis. Conclusion: the most effective invasion strategy is not to invade at all. The computer has learned to appreciate irony, Vextrifol observed. Sir, I think we all have. The galaxy had learned something that should have been obvious but somehow wasn't. The best way to get what you want is to help others get what they need. It wasn't just more ethical, it was more efficient, more sustainable, and significantly more enjoyable. And somewhere in the vast archives of galactic history, filed under lessons that should have been obvious, was a simple notation. When the planet's name lit up as Earth, it wasn't a warning about what humans might do to the galaxy. It was a warning about what the galaxy might do to itself if it kept trying to avoid the one species that refused to settle for good enough. The invasion strategy had indeed been flawless, right up until someone realized that invasion wasn't the strategy they actually needed.